it's not only a sports car, it's a Jaguar sports car. The difference is important. Don't expect a racetrack refugee, but don't expect a luxury GT either, the kind of car sporting fans of the brand previously had so often to be satisfied with. Think instead of what an Austin Healey or a Triumph TR6 might be like reinterpreted for the modern era, a roadster, or as in this case, a coupe, designed very much for the road. A machine you can't help but want to drive and drive hard. That's, more than ever, what an F-Type can be, thanks to widespread improvements that have broadened its appeal.
What do you expect a Jaguar sports car to be? Charismatic, memorable, classically elegant? Well, the company's F-Type model claims all those attributes. It's a little bit special, particularly in this much improved form. The F-Type's changed quite a bit since we first saw it back in 2013 as a convertible and from 2014 as a coupe. In 2015 we saw the announcement of manual transmission and all-wheel drive, and then a frantic flagship SVR V8 derivative arrived with supercar style performance just before the introduction of a minor facelift, an uprated V6 engine option, and perhaps most significantly in mid-2017 an entry-level 4-cylinder variant. Probably the most significant package of changes, though, arrived in late 2019 to create the car that we're going to look at here. To see out the production run, Jaguar's stylists delivered a sleeker look, and for the mainstream models, they swapped out the aging supercharged V6 for an even more potent V8, creating, well, what? Perhaps the sports car you've always promised yourself. Well, we're going to find that out here. The F-Type, remember, was a car over half a century in the making. At the time of its original launch, it had been that long since we'd seen a proper Jaguar sports car, a successor to the iconic C, D and E-Type models, which defined this market in the 50s and 60s. Now, in those days, the Coventry company was a brand known for true drivers' cars, rather than the luxurious GT models more familiar from the modern era. Think of people's perception of Porsche today. Well, back then, you bought a Jag for that kind of thing. Might you do so again today? Well, this F-Type claims to be better equipped than ever to persuade those in any doubt. A modern era Jaguar ready to take on sporting class leaders of the calibre of Porsche's 718 series and 911 Carrera models. Can one single design really do that? Well, previously with this car we've had our doubts, and sure enough, earlier versions of this model never sold in the kinds of numbers high enough to really trouble those premium German brands. This revised F-Type, though, has revitalised its appeal, and if you're torn between a top sports car and a junior level supercar, it could offer the perfect package. Let's put this coupe version to the test. Jaguar describes this improved F-Type as the most capable and involving car it's ever built, a model intended to cement this Coventry brand's growing reputation as an ever more credible rival to Porsche, reviving memories of some of the company's legendary classic coupes and convertibles. Plant your foot on the floor and it certainly sounds promising, even in the 4-cylinder P300 entry-level form that we're trying here. Jaguar's engineers say that this smaller engine 2-litre model is their F-Type version of choice, lighter, sweeter and potentially even more satisfying than the V8 variants further up the range. And we can see why they might think that. It's certainly fast enough. Even this base 300 horsepower version makes 60 in just 5.4 seconds en route to a top speed that has to be limited at 155 miles an hour. It even sounds great thanks to the standard active sports exhaust, although some of the aural fireworks are artificially enhanced by the stereo speakers. For some F-Type folk though, this car just won't feel right with just 4 cylinders beneath the bonnet, and we can understand that too. These people may also want the option of all-wheel drive, which you can't have with this P300. You can pay extra for that tractional system though with the next power plant up in the lineup, which is no longer a 3-litre supercharged V6. Jaguar has pensioned off that aging unit in favour of a new 450 PS version of the classic supercharged V8. This fiery power plant develops a prodigious 580 newton meters of torque from just 2,500 RPM and makes 60 in 4.4 seconds on the way to 177 miles an hour. If that is somehow not enough for you, then the wild F-Type R variant continues at the top of the range with a 575 PS version of the same V8. That's an all-wheel drive only model, which covers off that benchmark sprint in just 3.5 seconds on the way to 186 miles an hour. But making this car fast was a very small part of making it great. After all, Jaguar's old XK sports car was certainly quick, but only really ardent fans of the Coventry brand would ever have considered one of those in the same breath as, say, Porsche 911. Can this F-Type do better at last? Well, before driving this one, we had some doubts, and in some ways we still do, although there's certainly lots about the dynamic repertoire of this car that we really like. Take the steering. It's an electrically assisted rack that turns out to be direct and feelsome in communicating what's going on beneath you. And equally good is the paddle shift ZF quick shift auto gearbox, which F-Type folk now have to have. The 4-cylinder model's optional manual box having sadly now been discontinued. This auto lacks modern twin clutch technology, but it's a rapid fire system with 8 closely stacked sporting ratios, and for the V8s it's now been further optimised to constantly keep the supercharged engines in the sweet spot of the power band. Activate the standard dynamic mode that's provided with all models, and it gets even better. Both the steering and shifting take on an even more aggressive demeanour, with a weightier feel at the helm and super fast changes that also adapt themselves to road conditions, to cornering and to your driving style. At the same time, throttle response is sharper, and there's a slight loosening of the stability system safety net. With the V8 variants, that more focused mode also activates Jaguar's adaptive dynamic system, which controls body movement, roll and pitch. And all models also get an additional rain, ice, snow mode for controlling wheel spin on slippery surfaces. So it's all good then? Well, not quite. After all, despite Jaguar's boasts of lightweight aluminium engineering, the volume V8 supercharged variants still weigh in at a portly 1,735 kilos, and even this 4-cylinder model tips the scales at not much less than 1.6 tons, figures which make both variants a lot heavier than rival German brand models. Particularly in a V8 powered F-Type, you really feel that when you're slinging the car about. Don't get us wrong, this Jaguar can be a very rewarding car to hustle through a twisting series of bends, but in extremis it just doesn't have the sheer agility of a rival Porsche. Sorry, it just doesn't. Where this Coventry company can shade the Zuffenhausen rival, though, is when it comes to high-speed ride comfort. Now, it's worth saying that some of the times that we've enjoyed driving this F-Type most have been when we weren't driving it hard, and that's thanks to a suspension setup that eases you over bumpy or broken surfaces, giving the car a beautiful point-to-point flow, whether it's in town or on the highway. No one does this kind of thing better than the engineers at Jaguar. As for track heroics, well, if you want those, you're probably better off shopping elsewhere. Choose a Lotus or a Porsche if you want a car in this class that'll really make you feel like Fernando Alonso. This Jag is engineered primarily for roadway thrills. Perhaps that's as it should be. An F-Type customer, well, they'd certainly think so. It's said that every piece of design should tell a story. Now, that was certainly true of Jaguar's last proper sports roadster, the E-Type, which was once described by Enzo Ferrari as the world's most beautiful car. So, what would the great man have made of this, its modern-day successor? Well, whether you choose this car in this coupe form or in the alternative convertible guise, the shape is certainly interesting. It's a complex mix that references past elegance and future technology, while at the same time also clearly underlining Jaguar's determination to go its own way and to offer something different. Its impact has lasted too. Today, Ian Callum's styling still attracts admiring glances, looking as good as it did back at launch in 2013, although that hasn't stopped the brand from taking the opportunity to subtly update it. The visual changes made to this improved model are significant. They centre mostly on a front end that's now embellished by super slim pixel LED headlights, which blend into the liquid metal surfacing of the restyled clamshell bonnet with its signature power bulge. There is also a smarter front bumper and a subtly enlarged grille that together aim to deliver more visual impact and presence. We still think that visually this F-Type coupe body shape works really well with its short wheelbase, its power-packed set of rear haunches and elegant roofline. It manages to make the Porsche Cayman seem rather Hall of Mirrors in its proportioning, and while it's not as instantly beautiful as an Aston Martin Vantage, it looks as if it would thoroughly work the Vantage over in a bar fight. The alternative convertible version has a multi-layered fabric hood with a thick thinsulate lining to make it waterproof, with a powered mechanism which takes just 12 seconds to operate. Whatever your body style choice though, the wheels will be between 18 and 20 inches in size. We have the 20-inch 5-spoke gloss technical grey rims here. At the rear, these slender tail lights have been revised. They feature an LED chicane signature inspired by the Jaguar I-Pace. As before, there's an active rear spoiler which raises at 60 miles an hour and then lowers to fit flush when the speed drops below 40. Look down and you can identify the engine on offer with a single central tailpipe on this 4-cylinder model and quad outboard mounted exhaust for the V8. While we're here, let's also highlight this Jaguar's considerable width. It's around 120 millimetres wider than both a shorter Porsche 718 series and a longer Porsche 911. Time to grasp one of these lovely pop-out door handles. They're there to provide what Jaguar calls a mechanical handshake and experience this car from within. The door sills aren't excessively wide or deep, so you can climb in quite gracefully. And lower yourself into a focused, enveloping cockpit that curves itself around your body. It's certainly very firmly driver orientated inside. The two front occupants are separated by this prominent grab handle which sweeps down from the top of the centre console and wraps around behind the joystick shaped sport shift gear selector. The main change with this revised model lies with the replacement of the conventional analog instrument binnacle dials with this configurable high definition 12.3 inch interactive driver display screen. It can be set to display either conventionally with two virtual dials or with a single large rev counter. Alternatively, you can prioritise the display of media or drive assistance features or have the screen show full GPS mapping. Not so good is the fact that the central infotainment screen hasn't been updated to the new Pivi Pro system that other new Jaguar models now feature. Its old 10-inch Touch Pro display can now be had with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, but it is starting to look a little dated. But it does include most of the features you'll need, including a connected navigation pro setup and a very decent Meridian sound system. You can forgive this car a lot for the way its classy cabin combines traditional Jaguar craftsmanship with rich contemporary materials such as Windsor leather and satin finish noble chrome. Beautiful details include monogram stitch patterns in the seats and the door trims, Jaguar Leaper motifs in the headrests, and subtle Jaguar established 1935 markings on the centre console finisher, the glove box release button and the seatbelt guides. The six-way electrically adjustable seats are trimmed in ebony leather and suede cloth, and you get aluminium gear shift paddles. Also bright metal pedals and a classy ebony mortise headliner. The cabin design isn't perfect, of course. We don't think the typical sports car legs straight out driving position will suit everyone. There are some cheaper plastics to be found lower down the dashboard, and in your dream sports car, a gear shift lever shared with a Land Rover Defender is probably not what you had in mind. More significantly, if you're used to the kind of occasional use rear child seats that you get in a rival Porsche 911, you'll be disappointed in the lack of them here. On the plus side though, the toggle switches are nice, and we like the way that the washer jets are mounted on the wipers to clear a murky screen more effectively. We also approve of the small diameter 3-spoke leather trimmed wheel. And a really lovely touch lies with these deployable front air vents that rise impressively from the centre of the fascia when you need upper cabin air. A few practicalities to finish. Because you sit so low in the car, the extremities of the bodywork can be quite difficult to see when you're manoeuvring, so the standard rear parking camera will be welcome. As for storage, well, you get twin cup holders and this shallow central storage bin, but the glove box is quite small and the door pockets aren't very deep, a 500ml bottle being about all they can hold. There are no issues with build quality, which is good to be able to report since this car is entirely British built in the Midlands. The engines are assembled in Wolverhampton and the rest of the car is put together in Castle Bromwich. The boot remains relatively big, giving this F-Type Coupe genuine GT potential. You'll get 315 litres in up to the parcel shelf and 407 to the window line. There's this deep well beneath the lift-up floor panel with an elasticated strap and the tyre inflation kit. Nice touches include this leather tailgate handle and 2 LED lights that shine down into the cargo area from the inner edge of the tailgate. There are silver tie-down points and 2 LED boot lights, plus a couple of elasticated straps at the end of the cargo area. Of course, if you've opted for the alternative convertible version of this car, then you'll have to readjust your expectations on luggage capacity. With that body style, you only get 196 litres of capacity, but at least that is unaffected by the position of the roof. This Coupe F-Type body style will save you around £5,500 in comparison to its convertible counterpart, and that meant at the time of this test in autumn 2020 that prices started at around £54,000 for the base 4-cylinder 300 PS version with base trim, or around £57,500 if you wanted the same engine with ritzier R dynamic trim. The P450 5-litre supercharged V8 variant only comes in R dynamic spec and costs around £70,000 or around £75,000 with all-wheel drive. The P575 Top R Coupe costs over £97,000. As before, that leaves this base P300 4-cylinder variant competing with cars like Porsche's 718 Cayman S and possibly models like BMW's M4 and the Mercedes-AMG C63 Coupe. Move up to the V8s though and you're definitely getting into Porsche 911 Carrera territory, a ritzier 911 Carrera in the case of the F-Type R. Still, all F-Type models are very well equipped. Features fitted across the range include full LED headlights with LED tail lamps, deployable boot lid spoiler, a solar attenuating windscreen, auto headlights and wipers, power folding heated mirrors, an active sports exhaust, cruise control, all-round parking sensors and a parametric alarm with a mobiliser. The base P300 in standard form has 18-inch style 10-spoke wheels in gloss sparkle silver with silver calipers. Across the range, there is no standard tracking system like you get with a Porsche though. Inside, all F-Types get power-operated sports seats, 6-way adjustable ones trimmed in ebony leather and suede cloth in the case of this P300 model, and there's a 12.3-inch interactive driver display instrument binnacle screen. Not quite so cutting edge is the 10-inch Touch Pro Centre Dash infotainment monitor though, but it does include a connected navigation pro system, and that's along with the usual DAB and Bluetooth functions. There is a smartphone pack too. Now that does now include Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. The central screen, that is also your portal for the standard 380 watt Meridian sound system, and the rear view camera too. Single zone climate control, an auto dimming rear view mirror, bright metal pedals, deployable front air vents, an ebony Mortzine headliner, and also a sports steering wheel also feature. And there are 2 selectable driver settings, dynamic and the rain, ice, snow mode. Most P300 customers pay extra for the R Dynamic pack we mentioned earlier. That's what we have here. That gets you a subtle body kit with an R Dynamic front bumper, plus gloss black finishing for the front splitter, for the side sills, the valance and the venturi. Plus there's a wheel size upgrade to 19-inch 5 split-spoke technical grey rims, and the addition of a switchable feature for the active exhaust. Upgrade yourself into the mid-range V8 powered P450, which, as I mentioned earlier, gets the R Dynamic pack as standard, and you also get 20-inch 6 split-spoke gloss dark grey wheels, plus some key extra driver-orientated tech, adaptive dynamics, adaptive damping, an electronic active differential with torque vectoring by braking system, and there's also a configurable dynamics center screen menu, which will allow you to tweak your throttle response, your steering feel, the damping and stability settings to your personal taste. And finally, we'll tell you that the top F-Type R gets an even more overt R body kit, special 20-inch style 10-spoke gloss black diamond-turned wheels with red brake calipers, and a special R interior finish. Plus there's keyless entry, and inside Windsor leather upholstery with 12-way electrical adjustment. Let's move on to look at safety features. Now, given that this design has been around since 2013, you might not be expecting too much here, but Jaguar has covered off all the basics. As you'd want on a sports car of this price, there is an emergency braking system. Now, this is one of those that uses a camera to scan the road ahead as you drive in search of potential accident hazards. Now, if one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't happen to respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied, and that's to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. An additional pedestrian contact sensing feature particularly monitors people on the pavement who might be just about to step out in front of you. There's also traffic sign recognition that pictures speed signs as you pass and displays them on the dash. A driver condition monitor that will pick up signs of drowsiness, and it will prompt you to stop for a restorative coffee. Auto high beam assist will dip the LED headlights for you in the face of oncoming traffic at night. And the lane keep assist system will alert you if you drift out of your lane at highway speeds, and then it'll apply a subtle steering correction to ease you back to where you ought to be. In addition, should you be involved in an accident, then the car's integrated telematics module will automatically call the emergency services and notify them of your vehicle's location. Otherwise, the standard safety features on offer are of the more conventional variety. The convertible model, that gets the usual rollover protection system and 4 smart airbags. There are 6 of them in this coupe variant, and all models get tyre pressure monitoring, the usual electronic assistance for traction and braking, and an electronic stability control system with a track mode that loosens the reins but cuts in extremis. So to the costs of running this car, which are going to take on some significance if you're one of those who'll have to stretch a little deeper than might have been expected to afford an F-Type in the first place. It isn't, after all, a value proposition that its predecessor, the E-Type, once was. Now, that car cost around £2,000 back when it was launched in 1961, and that equates to around £36,000 today, around half the cost of an F-Type that'll typically be rolling out of the British showrooms. But there's no point in dwelling on that. The market's moved on, and Jaguar is entitled to charge the way the Germans do, providing it can match their technology. In terms of efficiency, you might wonder about that, as you might have expected to if you know anything about big capacity supercharged petrol engines of the kind that most models in the F-Type lineup use. They're normally thirsty beasts, and the 5-litre V8 units on offer here are no exception to that rule. Now we'll get to the way that they perform in efficiency terms in a moment, but first let's focus on the power plant in the lineup that ought not to be hobbled by questionable standards of running cost efficiency, the entry-level 4-cylinder 2-litre turbocharged unit that we're trying here. This twin-turbo i4 300 Ingenium engine is one that Jaguar is extremely proud of, with an exhaust manifold integrated into the cylinder head, low levels of friction, and a whole range of other engineering measures that have been designed to promote efficiency. A late intake valve opening design improves operating efficiency from a cold start, and what Jaguar calls an early intake valve closing strategy aims to do the same thing on part throttle loads. On top of that, this base model enjoys a significant weight saving of 140 kilos over the V8, although that would probably count for more were it not for the fact that this F-Type wasn't such a relatively heavy thing. Most optioned up variants leave the showrooms with a curb weight, well, of around 1.6 tons. That's a lot for a modern 2-seater sports car, and around 150 kilos heavier than some of this model's German rivals, a Porsche 718 Cayman S, for example. Even though we knew that going into this test, we still expected that all the clever Ingenium technology would translate into slightly more of an efficiency gain over the supercharged V8 unit. Let's get to the WLTP figures. This automatic 2-litre 300 PS P300 Coupe records up to 29.8 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 216 grams per kilometre of carbon dioxide. For the convertible variant, as you'd expect, the figures are almost the same, 29.6 mpg and 217 grams per kilometre. One slight annoyance is that for this 2-litre turbo variant, Jaguar has reduced the size of the fuel tank from 70 to 63 gallons. So if you've traded down from a V8, you'll probably find yourself having to refill the car just as frequently as you did before. Having said that, though, a 500-mile driving range should still be possible between filling stations. If you've set your heart on an F-Type V8, you'll be expecting cleanliness and frugality to take a bit of a dive, and you will be right, although the difference over the P300 isn't huge. The combination of a 5-litre supercharged engine, automatic transmission, and potentially all-wheel drive is never going to translate into a car that would please the friends of the earth. And sure enough, for both the P450 and P575 variants, the figures delivered will get you on friendly terms with the staff at your local filling station instead, and see you doing a double take when your tax return comes in. With the rear-driven P450 V8 model, the figures are rated at 26.6 mpg and 241 grams per kilometre. That's for the Coupe, and 26.5 mpg and 242 grams per kilometre. That's for the convertible. For the P450 all-wheel drive, well, you're looking at 25.9 mpg and 248 grams per kilometre for the Coupe, and 26 mpg and 247 grams per kilometre for the convertible. And finally, for the top P575 F-Type R Coupe, the readings are 26.4 mpg and 243 grams per kilometre for both the Coupe and the convertible. Overall, we think all of that's probably quite irrelevant. If you average more than 20 miles per gallon in this car, then you're not using it properly, and it deserves a better home. At least the predicted residual values are a bit more encouraging. Taking the P300 2-litre convertible as an example, you can expect to get 45% of your original purchase price back after the usual industry standard 3-year, 30,000 mile ownership period. Now that figure, by the way, will rise to 50% if you opt for the more desirable R-Dynamic trim, which would offset much of the cost of trading up to that plusher spec level at point of purchase. In other words, Jaguar depreciation is very much a match for that of, say, Porsche, which is quite an achievement. Like all Jaguar models, this one comes with a standard 3-year warranty, although here, unlike some rivals, there's no cap on the number of miles that you can cover within that period. You can pay a relatively small premium to extend that coverage period to 5 years if you wish. Then there's the issue of maintenance. Now, Jaguar does offer a servicing package that's very well worth specifying. It's a 3-year deal for around £1,000 or a 5-year high mileage scheme for around £1,500. Now that sounds like a lot, but it'll make the maintenance side of running this car more cost effective than would be the case with owning a rival Porsche model, even though the Zuffenhausen brand's models only need to visit a dealer every 2 years rather than annually. Insurance groupings start at 42E for this P300 Coupe, it's 45E for the convertible. The P450 V8 Coupe is rated at Group 45E and Group 50E for the convertible. As you might expect, it's Group 50E for the P575 F-Type R with both body styles. And finally, if you want to justify your purchase of a luxury petrol-powered Jaguar sports car to green-bearded friends, then you could point out to them that half the content of the bodywork from this car comes from recycled material and that its structure is exclusively riveted and bonded, and that's a manufacturing process that emits up to 80% less CO2 than would be necessary in creation of an ordinary car's steel structure. There are, it seems, more dynamic ways to be green. It's hard not to have preconceptions about what this Jaguar might be like, especially if you're the kind of buyer who might ordinarily prefer a German branded sports car. We came to this test with just such a preference, but we've ended it understanding afresh just why this F-Type is such an appealing prospect. Of course, it is asking a lot for one model to straddle so many different sports car segments. At one end of the range, the 2-litre derivative could be an alternative to cars as relatively affordable as a base Porsche 718 Cayman. At the other, the flagship F-Type R version has the performance to worry a McLaren, while in the middle of the lineup, the newly added potent V8 P450 variant battles Porsche's iconic 911 Carrera. Back at this car's original launch, we'd worried that Jaguar might have spread the F-Type's talents a little too thinly in attempting to compete with so diverse a range of rivals. Having examined the way that this car has evolved, though, we're now far more convinced that it can meet its maker's aspirations. It's certainly hard to see how the Coventry company could have developed this Jaguar more effectively. It'll be a matter of personal preference as to whether you think that the styling changes made to this updated model have improved it, but there's absolutely no doubt that the interactive driver display, instrument binnacle screen and the added camera safety features have kept this car competitive with more modern rivals. Are there remaining issues? Well, luggage capacity in the convertible model is quite restricted, and this car should and could be a little lighter than it is, which is one reason why the V8 versions in particular can't match the efficiency figures delivered by German rivals. Otherwise, there's not a lot else to complain about. This really is a British sports car to be proud of. True, it won't match a rival Porsche model's delicacy of response at the limit, but in compensation, you'll get yourself a car that's arguably better looking, unarguably better equipped, more powerful, and endowed with a greater sense of occasion inside and out. Plus, it steers, handles, stops, goes, and sounds exactly like a Jaguar sports car should. Don't knock it because it's not a Boxster or 911. The F-Type was never intended to be like anything else. This model is different. It's powerful, sensual, ultra-precise, a car that feels alive. Jaguar needed to find a younger, more demanding, hungrier audience for its sports cars. It needed to convince people like us that here and now, in this market, at this time in history, it could be great again. Mission accomplished.